All right, this is my most recent poetry cycle that I've been working on. It's still under construction. It's called Other Worlds Than These. Other worlds than these. There are other worlds than these. A planet-sized atom, darkness kept in a cube, shadows that know no light, iridescent sunbeams of burnt gold, slices of frozen temporalities, liquid mercury memories, black holes the size of your teeth, spiders trapped in webs made out of time, dense cubes of dark red blood, viruses composed out of sharp cartilage, crawling rivers of molten uranium, hydrogen furnaces dug out of bottomless pits, helium suns that burn arc welder blue in the sky, bioluminescent fish suspended in empty space, 10,000 tiny human skeletons held in the palm of the hand, ancient books made out of human skin, chlorine dreams that dissolve neurons like acid, webs made out of liquid nitrogen, planets on fire with dying angels burning inside them, magmatic flows of condensed human blood, microscopic skulls floating in the bloodstream like viruses, cities in deep jungles made out of dream fibers, paleochronological vortices hovering in midair, heavy rhizomes woven out of human scalps, echoes from a dead sun that someone has buried in the ground, the giant black spider that lives in the core of the sun, armies of carbonized scorpions dismantling a dragonfly the size of a bird, a broken moon that has stopped dead in its tracks, motionless, round craters full of living dead men with no eyes, archaic yellowing maps of cities that never even existed, an ice field of stiffened dead giants, a raven the size of an ant that died in the egg, a star that has exploded into red corpuscles, fishing in the abyss at the edge of the earth. The nothing. They stood looking out over the edge of the earth, all of them in a line kicking rocks into the vast vacant void of blackness beneath their feet. Then one of them said, "What's out there?" The one who answered was holding a torch that burned a soft gold aura around him, and he said, "It's the nothing. The nothing is out there." They paused for a moment, vanilla torches glowing like carbide lamps, and then, tentatively at first, but more quickly with increasing rhythm, each one of them took a step forward and dropped into the void, falling silently, soundlessly, tumbling into the deep infinite black depths until all of them were gone. Child. An angel on fire fell burning into a field, but it was just a girl. And when they unwrapped her wings, still smoldering, the child stood up, tall, thin, spindly, barely to the knees, and the terrified people stood surrounding it as she said, "I have come to you before. My name then was Gabriel. Now it is Azazel." And then the small pink tender child drew forth a long silver trumpet and blew. That's how it began. Bone Mountain. If all the bones of every human who had ever lived could be stacked to the size of a mountain, explorers would come from all directions to scale the Bone Mountain. But many of them would die along the way, and no one would ever remember them, but their bones would be in just the right place. The Last Man. The last man upon the earth, behold him, a thin, shambling stick-figure wicker man in a desert dawn. Those are holes that were his eyes, and a mouth with broken chips where teeth used to be. But his one virtue is this: he still walks, though it is with a ragged, bent-legged motion, as if he were dancing the jig of the apocalypse. Man on fire. This man is on fire. Watch him burn. He would rather be anyplace else, but for now burning suits him just fine. Gas station. Nighttime gas station with fluorescent humming, gaslight blue neon. A lone kamikaze moth crashes into the sign and sizzles. Outside on the interstate, no one notices this tiny sacrifice. Lavender cosmos. If space was lavender instead of black, the stars' vanilla smears against thick slabs of twilight-colored lavender, and solar arcs of red and green doing sparking fiery pinwheels while gods are busy in ancient volcanic furnaces forging new stars, fishing them out with glowing tongs, and placing them in the firmament just so. Incandescent men with light swords locked inside burning orbs where they radiate lightning thrusts of immense power to turn the orbs, while luminous galaxies drift and float around them, like jellyfish. All this happened once, but it was a very long time ago. The Empyrean. A god can do it. The ancient measure that opened an abyss between the spheres where angels walk black seams along onyx corridors, and blue streams made of star gold convolute into rivers that splay along the cracks between all the infinities dividing me from you. And the arcuate cosmographer whose design no man can remember, but only Adam Cadmon, whose brain contained the vault where all stars are made, both black and gold, in his memory. A vision. You saw them. 10,000 angels gathered together on a flat white plain with bodies of gold exoskeletons and serrulate angles with spindle-thin limbs that moved, arched like the body of some elegant insect made out of jasper and beryllium, chalcedony and onyx, minerals of white gold, silver, and agate that conflated and gathered to choir a rhythm that moved the planets as they swayed around you in dead orbits long decayed. Their angelic bodies hummed and their limbs moved and their faces were carved like waxen clockwork, while tiny metal eyes that gleamed opalescent with the spheres as they turned and the ivory panels of the cosmic arches moved, glittering with iridescent dragonfly wings on their backs that caught chips of gold light as they fanned in the dim orange twilight on the silver pane of glass where you found yourself among the arcs of azimuth and declination that spanned blocks of cosmic rib cages that arched where stars burned with ancient livid beauty and gold-thrummed archaic density. Their faces, when they looked at you, melted and shifted into something you couldn't understand and didn't want to know, as they asked you of ancient darknesses and floating islands of space where old dead gods now lay, wrapped in cocoons of silver thread and spun ivory that latched into seams of woven gold by some forgotten insect, long known only to the angels who let it spin those threads that bound you to the lattices and gears of the ancient machine that surrounded you as you wandered among the stars. Illuminated Earth. You had a vision that descended to you with a white gold texture that opened a core in your brain, and you could see it displayed before you across the mosaic tesserae of your mind. The earth split open at the seams where coral reefs painted lavender burned in the ancient sunlight and stirred aquamarine waters to foam. Newborn islands emerged out of the blue-green depths, a chain of ochre and copper discs like the vertebrae along the spine of some dead dragon awakening. Upon each of these islands a different scene was unfolding, tiny historiations of gold and green, malachite and carmine upon the illuminated ocean. In one of them a man was saying mass as his god descended in a white arc of light from the blue, and flashed forth in the wafer and the wine upon the ragged stone altar before him. Upon another 3 men were taking turns sodomizing a woman, as she lay on all fours on the gold sand, and the men moaned as they came inside of her, while the nacreous fluid dripped out of her wet pink hole. Upon another island 5 men in brown robes were disputing a text that lay open with vellum pages and gold-burnished designs that splayed arcs of beauty to the sun and the trees, as the men argued over hidden meanings in the mysterious letters inscribed upon the pages. Upon yet another island 4 men were taking turns whipping a woman with a crop, as she lay writhing in agony upon the sand, and the blood from her naked back arced in dark crimson streams along the pale curvature of her white spine. Crimson arcs of frenzied ecstasy that erupted out of a spine with a brain opening floods of chaos and rapture in the gold-blue foliations of a laminate sun, illuminated the earth, transforming its waters into a green sheet of silver, as the sun's light came alive upon the waters pulsing inside the dark, wet planet, which expanded with an orgasm of rippling waves that migrated through these islands scattered upon its surface to make ready for replication of its squirming forms as they performed their preformed agonies that soon would shatter and scatter throughout the earth with profusion of their delicate miniature anatomies. Black angels. Out of the milky green rocks where great torsions rose and met the tensions of the scaffolding to give birth to rising metallic appendages that clove the ground in shattered arcs of ruptured earth mounds, pylons rose with steel profusion and gray cables spanned wires across infinite deserts that carved chromium lines into the blue enamel, wires that stretched held taut with infinite rows of dark angels that aligned their steely corded wastage and serrulate cages of black-winged beasts with 4-faced heads and broken claws that arced and rose in red-beaked waves. Each beast arose in turn upon the wire and sang a dirge of green chaos and decay that resounded over the desert where ancient cracked mounds echoed the songs and sent them back in ricochets across ruined pink canyons of limestone and shale, as yellowed suns rose at the edges where the earth ran out of sky and opened up into amber hills that curved over the earth beams as they ascended to meet them. You could never be certain when it was, but all at once they rose 10,000 black-winged angels from the wires in mass profusion migrating to the heavens, ascending upon the celestial vault through turning crystalline gyres, marked by dead livid cold stars that scarred the globes as they rose in the ancient night where the orbs burned, and the night animals rose to greet them, gathering in gold-burning lines across their silver surfaces. As the black angels ascended toward a fiery orb, an ancient furnace where they joined to infect the orb that fed full of angels, in mass swarming profusions of intricate opaque densities and micromolecular lattices until the dark sun exploded and sent them scattering into the infinite chaos, where wastes of velvet space fed them tiny green carbon atoms, and the black angels disintegrated across the manifold and went spilling over the edges of crimson-stained spiral nebulae that overwhelmed them, and built them into vast cosmic architectures that erupted with shining arcs of gold and silver threads of glittering iridescence that wove new seams upon the ancient canvases of space, gleaming like some cartographer's gold orb that once guided ships upon the blue ball, lost at the edge of a foam-white shore where dead dreams lay splayed and dying, as the articulate black angels formed together to make one being, an old dead god, washed ashore with enormous wings. Message. Where you wander now, a luminous sojourner across the glow of infinity, where bridges arc and soar like old dead castles, on fields where feet impressed the mud lightly once long ago, you were a tiny broken doll, but now you are a goddess, with arms like the gilded feathers of a peacock, splayed out to reach down to us here, the fallen ones, stuck in a world of such density that only old gods weaving on creaking looms could have constructed it. You are not broken any more, but a smooth, gleaming hole, iridescent as the pink shells in a tidal pool that someone once waded through many years ago and then forgot about it, until the memory of the emerald green came back one afternoon, as the tail lights blossomed in the rain, electric roses in the gloom, where you paused, then crossed the street, as the memory of it sailed with you, a constant sojourner of a message too full of the infinite for you ever to fully grasp. Growth. The thing was, I could never remember to forget you, and I felt you inside of me, a tiny girl with glistening pink skin and hair the color of old wood, that has remembered too much rain and gone soft inside. I walked with you that way for a while, a mammal in a nest inside me which only wanted to sleep and dream of other worlds and couldn't be troubled to awaken when I needed you. But you kept growing, like an embryo in some flask, tended to by an aging dreamer of newborn genetic homunculi, who sat waiting and watching while the cells split like the skin of an orange and kept dividing and dividing, and you kept growing. And soon you were too large to fit in that nest in my heart, and you grew and grew, an old memory that troubles at the periphery of my mind, looming and weaving an enormous thing that followed me now, too big for its nest, hovering over me, flashing with the pulse of old worn-out lightning, copper-colored cumulus over the desert mountains. You were too big for me now, a giant wicker girl, walking along the edges of the sky, creaking with the sound of old wood, carrying me now inside you, a tiny mammal that has learned its place in the world inside you. Beauty. The splayed iridescent arcs of star streams swirling off the belt of Orion. Stars foaming at their cores, burning up hydrogen in glowing magmatic furnaces. Black holes of burnt-out suns drifting like ghost ships across an ocean of curved space. Supernovae that explode in glittering shards of elements that spray fiery metallic ores, gleaming blue chips across black space. Pulsars, quasars, and vectorless quantum fields that blink, shape, and burn in bottomless gloom. But you are more beautiful than any of this. The twin black holes of your eyes that opened onto the burning cathedral of livid pain inside you, where you were lost in the forge of an old smithy that no one knew about anymore. You came to this world bringing the cold outer dark of the abyss along with you, and the faded memories of lifetimes that leaked out of you as you walked along the verge where the sky and the earth meet, talking to yourself softly in the velvet twilight of a dying evening. Of old worlds that you had never remembered to forget, and the trail of uninhabited vacant shells of the bodies you once inhabited left behind you like small pale mummies, forgotten about in some old stone corridor. You were so beautiful to me, and I lost myself in the Sargasso seas inside of you, where I drifted for days alone and forlorn, waiting for you to join me. And finally you did. One day you became a star, shining with a pale copper hue in the twilight while I stood beneath it and looked up to you, wondering what new worlds you had migrated to without me. A poem for someone. I don't think there's one more beautiful thing left to say about you, except this. You descended to the earth a smoldering meteorite, thin crimson arc inscribed on the blue enamel, and you took planets and made them your eyes, dark palaces of sky-numbed oblivion, and you took a piece of the moon and made it your heart, an amber slice of molten sky, and you took carbon from a dead asteroid and made your bones out of it, tiny serrated rows of hexagonal molecules, and you took away part of an angel's wing and ate it as a Eucharist, and you broke off a piece of Orion and made it into your glowing, luminous brain. And you took a piece of Venus and made it your vagina, a throbbing, pulsing, voracious orifice. And then came the day of your birth, but it was a deception because what crawled out was just a furry, crying mammal, nothing special at all, at least not to the eyes of a hypersimian ape brain. X-ray girlfriend. The thing I always liked about you is that your bones lit up every time I touched you. You became translucent, and I could see your violet heart beating, your pallid stomach pulsing, and the web-like wonderwork of your nervous system. No wonder you were my favorite girlfriend. Whenever we went out for walks at night, you would light the way, a bioluminescent fish squirming beside me. Fallen. Did you not see it? The crimson bird at the edge of the sky that fell into a field where the coffee-colored dirt ate it, and beneath the ground a silver beetle came to replace it and grew spidery legs that rose from the earth to become the old spindly tree at the top of the hill that always carves its fingers into the burning gold lamps set into the heavens once long ago by gods. Animals. Maps made by ancient cartographers who set the haunted stars alight and drew cosmic arches and light circles of gold animals where old wanderers who crossed them forgot to remember how their splayed rib cages, when opened up, revealed the origins of light. Earth void. In darkness, a nest of atoms blow fusion, like a god lighting the lamps of space, or an arc welder's torch that sears a hole in the cornea of the eye of God, in which tiny beings gather to form gold flecks that gleam where the sun is forged and the rocks are made, like old gray forms of darkened demons that crawled upon the lid of heaven and marked its dome with scissions of corrugated arcs and cerulate foams that surge in the blue havoc where the earth void was made. Explosion. The sun exploded into flecks of gray chert and white flint that lit up with an old fury in which only devils strewn upon the smooth surface of the earth, like scattered nomads, could ever resent. But the darkness of a space that was only then nascent could resist the stars that burned in its ebony and onyx field, and only glowing gold photons could shower the primordial earth with the runes of night that could decipher their messages. After all, a god could do it, but a god could do almost anything in the ruins of a man's mind. Arabic numerals. Numbers that emerged reborn, hatched from the eggs of bearded men with the splayed vellum pages of their old codices open upon candlelit tables before them, where spiders pulsed in black gem-like bodies in the corners beyond their reach, and murky shadows crawled along the mud walls as pieces flaked off quietly into the corners, and the equations surged forth to meet the papyrus reed stencils upon the pages of texts, opening up the insides of infinity. The fossil at the edge of the world. At the space in the gap where the world ends, dismantled strata crumble and fall, chips into a bare gray void where no forms live, but livid lights that bear translucent arcs of white effulgence. An old fossil may be found of a dead god, with an arcuate spine, tracing spidery lines with fine precision in rocks too old for mercury, and crimson suns burn all around it, forming a chaos of splintered light broken into scintillae there at the edge where the world ends and the stars begin. Lines. Chromium arcs follow radii of translucence, where sunbeams, spun by spidery angels, break across a gold-plated manifold and draw angles to infinity. No human presence could defile the barren trees that lay waste in the old copper deserts where the dark horizon meets a cerulean sky and a dead moth. Fields. The ancient fields drawn from space are visible from a spinning orbit where gold-burning stars walk the dome of an ebony heaven, and rows of angels harness powers too ancient for the mind or memory of a deformed ape that walked from trees out of emerald jungles when the magmatic planet was riven with glowing fissures of burning tailings, and the earth was aflame with geomagnetic lines of ever-unfolding incandescence. Pole. At the pole, where flat frozen disks float upon turquoise skies, and an ivory glacier that melts beneath the core of a liquid sun, burning copper wastes that live around it and sear the emerald horizons, where no one lives but gods made out of living ice and dying fossils. Laminar flow. The earth is a laminar flow of dendritic topologies that cross and splay in red arcs and green lines, that crease the canyons and fold serpentine valleys under the lime and gold edges where nightline darknesses decay into broken white lines that glow gold at night like the insides of a jellyfish that has exploded and wrapped itself around the earth. Magmatic sutures. The newborn earth, an incandescent shell of burning rivers, striping a tiny ball trailing the ghost of a monstrous star. Magmatic sutures hold the wounds together in flecks of iron and carbonite chaos that would spin and flux if left to itself, into the newborn gold of ancient night, where fiery furnaces burn along the edges of the blackened dome of an archaic sky, where angels made out of burning atoms once lit their campfires. Chunk of human. I am not a human, I am a chunk of a human. I have a soul that someone took a bite out of. I have a brain laid waste by alcohol. I have feelings that have been stolen from me by women that I will never get back. There's nothing whole about me. I am the moon that was pulled apart and can't be put back together again. 8 songs of a nomad flute. In China, there is a song of 8 nomads for a flute, in which a woman is abducted by 2 Xiongnu barbarians, and she lives with them for 8 years in tents and icy cold yurts, but she bears the man 2 children whom she loved, but not enough, because when they come for her, she goes easily back with her people, and she wonders how 2 could have torn her heart to pieces whom she will never see again. But there are 2 birds on the window, standing black against white, and she wonders, did she like the barbarian better? Did she like his wild snow lion better? She will never know the answers to these things. She just sits and weaves and wonders where her children are. The bones of the sky. Azimuth and declination cross roof beams over the arches on the inside of some Byzantine dome, where Urania sings from her gold tesserae, ecliptic of radiant forms, and the celestial equator once held ships at sea, anchored to the blue-green ocean, while men at home made maps and cartographers melted down the earth by candlelight and reforged it each day until terra incognita became cognitions in the brains of mathematicians, where equations that connected earth to sky sparked in glowing gold rows along the Cartesian axes of illuminated neurons. Gold growth. These arcs are sewn into the rocks, thin filaments and ice-yellow strands that wayward rocks in space picked up and pressed beneath a warped orbit, that wove webs of gold light, sliced from the sun and grown in vats of spatial alchemy that broke into pieces and split them with the light that fell into the rocks where sunlight cooked them. Tiny cathedrals of nuclei froze around them and formed bones that ate their gold. Where Satan was made. The old darkness where Satan was made joined the edges of a gold-brown earth, and suns died as they were born in moments of carmine and silver, streaks that shot forth over the edges of a dead-brown sky that once beheld a cosmic arch separating the green night from chunks of an old dried earth that sank, a dead sediment, to the bottom where it fell, to be raised once again by the might of a newborn Atlas. Whale skeleton. I carved a whale skeleton out of the night and built the bones of its rib cage out of ancient amber that still burned with the memory of its making inside the moist black earth, and set it upon the verge where multiple stars gathered in dense profusion that raced to set their glow above it, while the edges of a crooked sky grew spinal columns of dirt rising with the arc of the sun's motion into a dome of cavernous skin that looked like salmon. Too often a man you once knew gave you shells that you kept in a metal drawer and only took them out on days when the skeleton of the sun burned an X-ray through the enamel sky, and shadows painted upon the living room floor made out of lemon light gone stale as the clouds crawled across it gave birth to strange forms with faces that gazed back at you, and the shells sank into the soft earth inside your memory, where, years later, they germinated and grew new appendages that always stalked the peripheries of your vision as you walked the glossy black streets of the wet city. Somewhere the sky is on the earth, and the earth can be found mirrored back in glossy black aquatic surfaces and coffee-colored seas of dust where camels pull old dead wrecks and men wearing burnouses ride them, searching for long-forgotten cities. And I'm going to read this poem about the descent, my description of the descent of the sun god Re's journey through the Egyptian Amduat, the Egyptian underworld. And this was the poem that gave rise to the style that I used for retelling the Gilgamesh epic in my novel, Gilgamesh Redux. It comes right out of this poem of the 12 hours of the night. First hour. Above the dark green tree line of the western bank there is a cleft rent into the hills into which the creaking barge of ram-headed Re has gone. That swallower of all has welcomed him as he floats along the heavy purple waters of the subterranean river, past 4 incandescent cobras which spit fire at him in greeting. The arms of the baboon arise, and the goddesses of the hours to greet. Mot hails him, for justice reigns, even in the realm below. And a parallel mirror-black river, where another barge with the scarab beetle worshipped by Osiris is pregnant with the dawn. Second hour. Gods arise with the herald of his luminosity. Khnum, Sekhmet, Tot, Horus, and Set. In the fields of jade-green reeds, peasants stand spine erect with spears of wheat raised. Re stands inside his wobbling reed hut to grant them, these dead, their share of land eternal in the gloaming Duat. Third hour. Osiris, seated and cocooned in linen multiplied fourfold and wearing the white crown on chairs in the red dirt. 5 men with glistening skin and serpent heads are holding long flint knives who turn to see him coming. The baboon from the branches comes alive as he is touched by the pale peach-colored gentle glow emanating from the lucent barge. 4 men walking with no arms turn and nod as the boat glides by, and Osiris again multiplied into 4 with the red crown bound to their chairs along the river bank, seated unmoving and impassive. Fourth hour. All at once the river has dried up. The purple flowing water has shrunken to a muddy black silt, and the oarsmen must now get out clambering to haul the barge with long ropes upon their backs. It is Razatau, the land of Sokar, a dry sandy waste of russet dunes and leafless black trees that glow dark against a mauve sky. Horus and Sokar bring in the eye upon a tray to watch over the scene as the boat struggles along the ruined river bottom. Fifth hour. The land ahead, colored soft yellow with sand, rises into a tumulus upon which 2 birds the goddesses Isis and Nephthys have alighted. Inside the mound, an X-ray reveals that the scarab beetle is caught struggling for birth. The oarsmen heave and sweat to drag the barge past a cliff where a cavernous depth reveals the domain of the ancient god Sokar and the 6-headed serpent which guards it. Beyond it, in the rising swale of earth, the ground ends to form a brackish lake filled with burning pits of fire where men are being tortured and burned. Sixth hour. It is midnight and the river waters have resumed flowing, but the waters are a deep charcoal black as they open out into a seethy abyss known as Nun, an endless cosmic chaotic expanse of waste and ruin. Upon a rust-colored island in the middle is the throne of Osiris, which gleams the color of milk as the cocooned god rests unmoving and silent upon his throne, and at his feet the corpse of Re, his Khat, awaits union with the approach of the Ba of Re upon his barge. Nearby, the god Tot with the baboon head works upon the eye of Horus to prepare it for rebirth in the world above. It is leaking a dull glow into the dark expanse of the abyss of Nun. Seventh hour. An enormous red and green serpent, the Apophis snake, lies splayed upon the river banks, while the god Set cuts it into neat, segmented pieces perfectly arranged. Nearby, a demon with a cat's head is slicing off the heads of the enemies of Osiris who have dared stand against him, and now they kneel with hands bound behind their backs as the cat demon flays them. The air is murky and dark, but in the blue distance a line of 12 men and 12 women are approaching, each bearing a star that shines white-blue in the gloom with the diminished approach of the sun barge of Re. In the dirty river waters, a lumpy, misshapen crocodile is searching for the missing pieces of Osiris. Eighth hour. Cliffs rise, ranged along the dark banks with doors entering into tombs hinged upon them, and they crack open at the approach of Re to reveal the human-headed Ba birds inside them, which hail him as his barge passes by. In the silvery twilight air, a line of women weaving gleaming clothing to apparel the dead in linen shrouds unfolds upon the river banks, and the god Tatanan, who is assisting them, is a giant who rises at the approach of the barge, and with 4 ram's heads he snorts as it goes by, then resumes his work amongst the weavers. Ninth hour. In the gloom, a luminous line of 12 cobras emerges, spitting bright orange flames into the air as the barge lumbers creaking by. The oarsmen stand and raise their oars into the air, greeting a line of servants along the banks who are passing by, bearing provisions in pots upon their heads, with food for the dead, figs and loaves, cakes and beer, wine and meat. Each stands and stops to marvel at the gathering light as the barge glides by, its light becoming ever stronger and more lucent in the heavy air of the Duat as it moves. 10th hour. It is the realm of those who have died by drowning, and their swollen purple bodies go bobbing past the barge as it cuts the dark waters, and the god Horus with his falcon head awaits in the gloom to resurrect them upon the sandy riverbank. 4 goddesses light the night air with fire serpents upon their heads, which illumine the bones of the sky with radiant gold lucence, and the bioskeletons of their spiny backbones visible in X-ray geodesic format upon their heads. The eye of Horus is brought forth, borne by the gods Tot and Sekhmet, who are working upon it to heal and restore its energies for emergence, as a line of warriors clear a path to decimate the enemies of the barge with spears and arrows shot forth from their bows, which lay waste to demons attempting to bar its path. 11th hour. A line of men emerges, carrying upon their heads the coils of a gigantic green serpent known as the World Encircler. 4 goddesses light the gloom, riding upon the backs of 2-headed cobras, which shoot fire at the demons who slither and glide and gibber in the way of the barge. Another group of fire goddesses with glowing, burning knives are cutting apart demons and casting them into huge, round, flaming fire pits. Up ahead, the falcon god raises his hand to signal that he has found the way through, and the oarsmen salute him to manage the barge, down another channel of the river to clear the way for the birth of the sun. 12th hour. They have entered into the bioskeletal geomass of the world-encircling serpent, whose ribs form cosmic arches around them as the barge flows past and the jaws open great huge skeletal jawbones that disgorge the sun barge of Re, and the glowing luminous scarab beetle on the prow at once leaps into the waiting arms of the air god Shu, who has opened the enormous creaking gates of the netherworld and lifts the sun beetle upon his head like the god Atlas, holding the cosmos as he wades through the river and hurls it through the arch of the opening to cosmic applause as the barge of Re then rides the crest of the currents that pour over the edge and drop down through into the sudden, deep azure blue depths of the daytime riverine heavenly expanse of water, and Shu closes the vault of the netherworld behind them as the barge crawls forth from the cleft at the edge of the earth and is reborn once again. All right, resuming with other worlds than these, Jacob's ladder. Jacob on the hill fed an angel and drilled a hole in his head to let them all out. Skull flowers rise from Eden's deep. Where the Apsu floods with mud-washed spawn and rack of profusion, leviathanic fishhook for Job at the end of limestone epiphanies, where the mountain goes down for Moses. I am the I am that built the deep. Jonah's flesh can be eaten anywhere, but not in the palace at Amarna. Eye opening in his palms that not even Moses could see, and 1,000 arms of the Atun. The gods were cooked and eaten at Uruk, but in Ugaritic script, the Aleph Beth tongue that made them real is a scroll in the mouth to utter their names, and they are no more. Hathor will not save them, for her wrath is the lion's infinity that no one ever asked for, rows of sunken palm trees and gods mired to the knees. Joseph in the well became death-born. There is no mother of God. He is his own mother, himself to himself, on the tree. 2,000 years, and not a single new god. The dragon's back. By then the dragon had long since stopped moving, though it was still alive. It had fused with the land, and now forests dense with chattering birds grew all over its body. It no longer even resembled a dragon, but simply a large undulating hillside that people referred to as the dragon's back. Inside the forest there had grown up a small village of cube-shaped white houses topped with slanting red tile roofs. Every door was painted red, but no one could remember why. This was a village of craftsmen who were known roundabouts for their consummate skills as masters of their various trades. In addition to the usual bakers, tailors, candlers, shoemakers, etc., there was the blacksmith, the coppersmith, the glass blower, and the lens grinder. Now it so happened that one day a strange and ominous event befell the normally peaceful and productive village. As the coppersmith was standing in line waiting to get bread from the bakers, the blacksmith, who had been waiting quietly behind him, suddenly erupted into a fit of rage, drew forth a large gleaming knife, and used it to slit the coppersmith's throat from behind him. Completely taken by surprise, the coppersmith spasmed about, clutching his throat as all the blood in his body left him, and transformed his white shirt into a red rag. He died very quickly, and before anyone knew what had happened, the blacksmith had disappeared into the trees. The incident sparked off a rash of violent episodes throughout the town. One night, the glassblower, who had always been jealous of the lens grinder's superior skills, broke into his shop and set the place on fire. The lens grinder, a tired old loner, happened to be sleeping on a cot in the back room and was burned alive in the flames. The shoemaker, meanwhile, who had been for quite some time indebted to the tailor for loaning him some money, stabbed the tailor to death in broad daylight in the middle of the town square where some people were pleasantly having their lunch. The butcher was found dead with a knife in his gut, and 3 of his customers disemboweled on the shop's cutting room table behind him. No one knew what had happened. The candler's decapitated head was found dangling from a rope tied to a tree. The rest of his body was never found. No one quite knew what to make of this madness, but some of the elder folk, who remembered the days when the dragon still moved around, though slowly, and only when no one was looking, his position relative to the landscape simply changing very slightly, were heard to mumble, "It's the dragon and his evil ways again." The blacksmith, meanwhile, had begun collecting human bones and gathering them in his workshop to make implements out of them. He hacked away the cranium from a man's skull, stripped the decayed flesh from it, and used it as a bowl for eating soup. He also constructed a kind of truncheon by attaching another skull to the bones of a man's forearm. This was a very effective weapon, and he used it to murder a small child. He took the child's body back to his shop and made a stew out of it, which consumed from out of the skull he had made into a bowl. He now began to develop a serious taste for human flesh, and scavenged his way through the wrecked town looking for limbs, heads, and torsos from the various remains of all the village's unfortunate occupants. One afternoon he suddenly caught himself in the midst of hacking away at a body and looked around. There was a slight breeze ghosting its way through the leaves, but otherwise there was no other sound. He was the only survivor. This inspired him to return at once to his shop, where he began work on transforming a human thigh bone into a very large flute. When he had finished working on it, he took the bone flute out into the streets of the town, where he played a dirge of death and ruin, while dancing a mad little jig, swirling and swinging this way and that. From a distance, a lone wayfarer, looking across the valley toward that hill known as the Dragon's Back, would have almost sworn that the ancient rocky lichen-covered visage of the dragon appeared to be smiling.